Hello guys, hi. We'll be asking the question, is the King James Bible, being the only Bible that people should read according to the King James onlyists, is the King James Bible divine? If it's divine, what makes it divine? Obviously it can't be the original manuscripts the Bible was translated from, because that's already been ignored by the King James onlyists. Okay, so it must be that the English language, and particularly the English language at the time, spoken at the time of the King James Bible, was divine. So, I'm seeing that most of the King James onlyists are of seems to be just the people I've met from Australian and American origin, and not being funny, guys, but you don't speak the King's English, so what would you know about it? But you may have actually asked a question at some point where your language came from, and maybe from here we can actually work out whether King James English is spoken in time of the year 1611 was divine, was a divine tongue. Whether there's something about it which say made it only divine when used in the Bible or something like that. Perhaps no one actually outside of the church actually did speak the same language as the King James Bible is written in. Is it something unique, I wonder? But I have asked the question before, which no King James onlyists has answered, concerning my dear wife, who's Ukrainian, who speaks fluent Russian. What Bible she should read? Should she read the Russian Bible translated from the original manuscripts, the original the Greek and Hebrew copies which we have, which go back close to the times they're written in, or should she be reading a Russian Bible that's been translated from the King James Bible directly? Or is it the fact that all Christian people from around the world should actually learn 1611 King James English if they want to be proper Christians? Should I teach my budgies to start tweeting in thou arts and wherefores and that sort of thing? Yeah, simple question, really. But I'm going to give basically an English lesson, a history lesson, a layman's English lesson condensed down. I'm sure an actual English teacher would do his nuts in what I'm going to say, but this is basically in a small nutshell, and I don't claim to be an English scholar or anything like that, but I do speak English. So here's in a nutshell of how we have our language called English today, which I don't think you guys fully take into account, and it might help answer the question whether you think it is divine or not. Okay, the main tribe which actually we know a huge amount about to live on these shores known as England were the Celts. Okay, they weren't the first tribe here, and of course you had the Scots and the Picts up north, and you had the Welsh and the Irish, of course. They speak forms of Gaelic, and indeed the Celts themselves spoke a form of Gaelic as well. However, the Celts we do know came from northern Germany, northern Europe, and settled in England in the time prior to the Roman invasion. Now, then when the Romans came and settled here, they brought with them, of course, their language, or two languages in fact, Latin and Greek. Koine Greek was the business language of the world, of the known world at that time. Okay, no matter where you lived, any part of the Roman Empire, okay, you all spoke your own dialects, your own tongues, but the business language, the one unified language, wasn't Latin, it was Greek. Okay, because that's what people traded and did business with. Now, when the Roman Empire fell and the Romans went back, of course they still left people speaking those languages here. Okay, and of course you have the Celts, the remainder of the Celts who were here as well. And the next group of people who came in were also Germanic. They were the Angles and the Saxons. and they came into our shores and they settled, set up their towns and villages throughout England, and of course the main traders, much more than the Saxons, okay, people used to travel into Europe to trade, etc., were the Angles. Okay, of course, the period of time is known as Anglo-Saxon England. Okay, and everyone in Europe, and then the people in Britain themselves, began calling the southern part of the British Isles the land of the Angles, Angleland. Okay, you see how it's developed. Angleland to England. Okay, England. That's how the name of the southern part of the British Isles developed. Okay, but primarily Germanic languages being spoken. Then the Vikings began coming and settling, not in an overall conquest, but they did come and settle. They too came from Denmark, Norway, and etc. They too were Germanic peoples. So you've got these languages which is forming here, which is still a very hard language, very direct languages. Okay, being Germanic in origin. Then at the turn of the millennium, England, an Anglo-Saxon England, had a king called Edward the Confessor, and he had a relation who was called Richard, Duke of Normandy. And Richard, when he died, his throne was taken over by his son William. Now, when Edward died, one of the heirs to succession was, of course, William, Duke of Normandy. And there was a Saxon who protested this and claimed the crown, as too did a Viking called Harold Hardrada, who came over and tried to invade England. And Harold Godwinson, who was the Saxon guy, went up and fought this battle and kicked off the Viking invasion. Okay, came over and entrenched the ships. I think it was something like 20 ships came over, and 4 or 5 went back. It was such a decisive victory. But then he had this scrap with William, and lost. So the Normans took over England. The Normans were originally Vikings who had settled in northern France, because they were given this land by the French, and they had developed their own language. It was Normo-French. That's what it was pretty much. It was a combination of the Norman and the French languages. So you've suddenly got this influence of the French language coming in to English, because that's the language that was being used and so on. People started mingling stuff again, and then when people of the more French speakers, the Plantagenets, etc., came in, then you've got even more French coming into the English language. Okay, which so the English had softened a little bit, but still maintained its hard Germanic origins. And it's from this union of the German or Germanic languages and the fluidity of the French language, which is why we have this language today called English, which is a real mismatch. However, we had many different dialects throughout the nation, and if you want a Bible that's going to really change the English language, it's not the King James, it's the Great Bible, published under the time of King Henry VIII, because that actually solidified the southern dialect as English, and the language we speak today here, and indeed what you speak in America and in Australia, actually stems, the King's English stems from the southern dialect. So that really has changed the English speaking language. The big question is now is how do you get from that to divine, because there's close similarities between Shakespearean English and King James English. Okay, only 50 years or so difference between what was two. So if 1611 English is divine, does that make the work of Shakespeare divine as well? Ask an actor.